like in Arvi's case, it was he was going to school, and in the school he was facing bullying. I'm also wondering what happens online to minors, especially in social media.
Since social media has kind of penetrated our lives, bullying has become much more vicious. It's become much more vehement. It's become quite uh, ruthless, so to speak. And I think part of it is the anonymity that social media provides you, right? You don't have to create a profile in your name, you don't have to have a profile picture. And so that kind of has made it worse. Now, what we saw with Pranshu was that they did not even leave him after his death, right? Even after his death, there are thousands of new comments that have been talking about how good it is that he died. So you do leave a imprint in the social media after your death, and uh, I thank some part of me is thankful that he is not alive to see the hate that is still going on. But his parents have to, his mother especially, has to kind of still live with that hate, right? So even after um, your death, you're not left alone. And I've been very candid about it. I've written about it in the press about how I considered suicide as a legitimate option. Perhaps that is the only option available to these kids because there are no support systems officially in place. Mental health care remains a distant dream, which is that which is affordable, and more so that which is also queer affirmative. So I think when queer people are online, and it's not just minors, though of course the problem is much more severe when the person is a minor. But what we've seen is that there's a heightened level of bullying, there's heightened level of discrimination that is already there, but under the garb of anonymity, I think it gets aggravated.
I want to put this in the context of, as you may have realized with my questions, in the context of how people are trying to seek accountability of social media platforms, right? So, and in that, the whole queer angle is missing right now, for sure. So, as you know that it has been reported that Meta did not heed to the data that teens were not safe online, and you know we've not really had discussions about in what I mean is we have not really had discussions in our country. This was in the context of US and UK, etc. In our country, we've not really discussed about how social media is affecting minors. So, what do you think social media platforms need to do in if we can talk specifically from our country's context about this problem?
I think this is a multi-pronged answer that I would want to give to this. First, in context of social media platforms generally, and then also perhaps link it to the free speech debate that we are going through. Uh, let's first talk about social media platforms, right? Look, what's happening is that traditionally our free speech models have always looked at free speech interference from um, the state, right, where you've had state interfering with free speech. Now, what you're seeing is that social media essentially performs a public function of providing a platform for free speech. In that, when large corporations get their hands on such platforms and they occupy the kind of market portions that Facebook or Meta or X occupy, I think there is a case to be made out for state interference. But at the same time, there's also this flip side of allowing how interference by the government. We have seen in India about about what's happened with accounts being blocked, tweets being blocked. Um, you had the IT rules of 2021, which sought which proved which sort of sought accountability from in what it called intermediaries, quote unquote. Um, so there's no easy answer to this, but I think the best way out has to be an independent oversight body that is appointed by these corporations themselves, having representations from across the globe. Now, the problem also is that since all of these companies are based primarily in the United States, so much of their regulation of content is based in English, right? And if you look at any of those comments, a major chunk of them are simply put in Hindi, for example, right, to bypass all of those regulatory checks. Um, so there's no one way of going about it. There are multifarious answers, each which is with its own drawbacks, each with its own benefits. And I think the best way is to perhaps engage in a trial and error method and see what works best.
Uh, but do you want to say something about? So we have a lot of discussions about social media and hate speech in the context of when it comes to religious issues or any like different issues, right? But we don't really talk so much about children, the minors. So whether it's queer or otherwise, and as we know that research has shown that particularly teenage girls, it really affects research abroad, of course, not here. So I mean, what do we and I mean, as I've also said that there's a lot of data on bullying girls, and we don't really have data on, say, other constituency, like other
Right.
kinds of minors, right? So is someone like Pranchu, and so what kind of, first of all, what kind of data do we need in this particular, what kind of data do we need, one? And secondly, why do you think that we are not talking about children at all? Like which is such a big issue abroad. Uh, uh,
Right, I think
it's
two reasons, and I think one is that perhaps the Indian child rights movement hasn't considered online spaces to be as important, right?
Mhm.
Um, Now, how do you deal with online bullying? Now, there's two answers. If the person who's bullying is an adult, then you can criminally prosecute them under available laws. So, say if it's a man sexually harassing a minor girl, you try him under POCSO. The problem becomes when there's a child-on-child bullying, right? Because you don't want to
Hmm.
push push children into the criminal justice system as well, and
Juvenile
then
justice.
nor do you want to kind of put your children through the rigmarole of trial, because look, that these, you cannot downplay the importance of the reformative theory, right? And reformation is important, especially when it's a child involved. But at the same time, bullying needs to be dealt with. Now, what are the things that you can deal? What are your possible solutions? Say a permanent ban on social media. If a minor harasses another minor, block them off that social media and all of its allied platforms. So if you bully somebody on, say, Instagram, then you get blocked off Instagram and Facebook. That's one solution. The second thing I think is, look at the nature and the extent of the problem. It's fair to say that girls are getting harassed online. How much of it is coming from men? How much of it is coming from boys? How much of it is coming from girls? Um, those are important questions that we need to answer. Any solution that we propose, or any solution that is proposed, especially when it's legal, cannot be done unless we have solid data in front of us, that has been reviewed and re-reviewed. Because we don't know the nature of the monster yet. We know there's a monster. We know there's a bogeyman. uh, we know what the bogeyman's eyes look like. We know what its hands look like, but we don't have the full picture yet. So any solution that we try to look for has to first involve collecting of data. Now, how do we collect data? There are groups that have been tracking bullying. There are groups which have been, advocacy groups of children, of queer people, of trans people who've been doing it. Uh, Second thing I think is also parental control, right? There's no doubt that every child must be protected from not just abuse but also from violence and exploitation that happen on the internet. But we've also, in a post-pandemic world, we've realized that whether we like it or not, social media is one of the realities of our times, and that parents can only do so much to keep the children away from it. Uh, the right to internet, for example, has been held to be a fundamental right, right? So there is cyberbullying, there is peer-to-peer violence that affects children in the long term when they access social media. Uh, but I think far more important, I think, is that it's this problem is not just India centric. A person being bullied in India could be sitting in Germany, could be sitting in Mauritius, could be sitting anywhere around the globe. Um, we've had cases where child sex abuse has been live streamed. How do you seek kind of accountability for that? These are problems which perhaps our traditional criminal justice system does not have the tools to deal with. Uh, what we need is a new problem that calls for experts who are not just experts legal in the legal field, but also experts on internet, experts on sexual abuse, experts on bullying, experts on homophobia. All of them need to come up with the government, with the tech companies, and it's only with these advocacy groups coming together that we will be able to come up with an acceptable set of safety norms on that platforms, right? Um, yeah.